Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the Sunday garden question and answer video that I do almost every Sunday of the month. The first Sunday of the month I do a subscriber Sunday video where subscribers send in photos of things in their yard that they're proud of. If you'd like to send in photos for that video, the email address is right here. I already have a lot of photos already gathered up for the October video, but the photos I gather up in September will go in the first Sunday of October's video. Thanks for participating in that. And thanks for participating in all things on this channel. The channel has grown a lot this year. I'm more than doubled the subscribers this year, and I'm coming up on 100,000. And as I get closer to 100,000, I'm going to do some giveaways. At 100,000, I have several companies that are going to participate in a larger giveaway. This week will be the first one, and I'm going to give away one of these Sunjoe electric tillers that you've seen me use on the channel. I don't do a lot of tilling. I don't think it's necessary most of the time. It can be damaging to soil to, bring up all the microbes from under the soil and expose them to the sun and the wind and that kind of thing. But there are times I use this tiller and it works very well. I use it in the vegetable garden. I'll use it to put in annual beds. I used it when I did the sod video. If you haven't seen the sodding of this space right here, this front and backyard. And so this little electric tiller does a pretty good job. If you had a lot of rocks and things, it's not that great, but works well. The way to be entered to have a chance to win the tiller that I'm giving away, for the first giveaway, is make a comment down below this video. It can be a question, because next week is a question and answer video, and I'll pick from those questions, or it can be just any random comment. It does not matter. It's only one tiller I'm giving away, but you can enter a second time on my Instagram account, which is at HortTube. If you haven't followed me over there, I usually post pretty much daily updates on what I have going on or things that are flowering in this yard, and those kinds of things, maybe where I'm at if I'm on the road or that kind of thing. You can make a comment under the photo from today. It'll be me with that tiller. You can make a comment under that and be entered a second time. You can tag a friend over there. That can be your comment as well. There you go. There's the tiller, the introduction of the tiller giveaway. I'll have that. I'll draw the name for the winner for that next week, and I'll introduce another giveaway at that time. Okay, so let's get to some gardening questions. So I've got several comments of people saying they appreciate the fact that I use show how to do things from seed and cuttings, and I don't use super expensive latest and the greatest annuals on this project, and that is with intent. My goal here is to show you that you don't have to break the bank in order to have a really colorful space and invite pollinators into your yard and really enjoy your space without spending a tremendous amount of money. I do have some patented and branded plants in this yard. The Sunshine Ligustrum, is still patented, and it's it's the shrubs. I think if you spend $5 to $10 extra on the latest and the greatest shrub, that's something that's going to stick around in your yard for the 20 or 30 years you live there, and you can enjoy it that whole time. Same thing with perennials. I don't mind spending an extra few dollars on something that's, herbaceous perennials, things that die back and, that come back every year. But when it comes to annuals, I do like to show, that we can start a lot of these things from seed. We can start our vegetables from seed. We can really save some money. I just wouldn't want to, to show you guys projects that were, $55 annuals, that were only going to last a season. I think that, certainly not against it. And I do purchase some of those more expensive latest and the greatest annuals and use them in containers where I'm confident that I'm going to get a good performance out of them during the year. But yeah, it is with intent that sometimes I look to, I'll come up with an idea in my mind for a project here, and then I go, what's the least expensive way I could show to do that? That is with intent. Okay, somebody asked me about moving boulders, that you can't get a piece of equipment in that area. I had a bobcat when I was landscaping. Of course, we just pick them up and move them, but there were times in a landscape job where you just couldn't get a piece of equipment to something. You had to dig a tree out or a plant out or something. Couldn't get a cable to it, couldn't do anything. And it just happens. With boulders, I've taken a 4-inch piece of PVC and cut it down into like 3-foot long lengths. So buy one 10-foot piece, cut it into 3 pieces and use it. It's a little awkward you got to move one, keep moving the pipe to the front, keep moving the pipe to the front. So it's a little awkward, but if you can get it up on those rollers, can be effective. If it's a thin stone, I've stood them up on end and then just walked them, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I've rolled them, I've put them on a piece of plastic, rolled them over on a piece of plastic, and then had several people, tie ropes onto the grommets and have several people slide it across the ground. But different situations, different techniques. But if you can roll them on a roller, it's super awkward, and you need several hands, extra hands to help you move the pipes, as you go. I don't know what the ground is like where you are, obviously, but that's one technique that I've used. I've gone Egyptian style, pyramid building style. Okay, somebody asked about the hell strip. I talked about last week planting plants in that, what we call the hell strip. It's the piece between the sidewalk and the road that a lot of you have. That, that's a little 2 foot or 18-inch to 2 foot piece of grass that's difficult to maintain because there's it's just a difficult space for a lot of different reasons. And somebody asked about how does that city regulate that, or who controls what you can plant in that space. I think if you don't have an HOA, that space is, generally speaking, is probably free for you to plant. But if you have my neighborhood is old and it has above ground electric lines, so if you have the electric on your side, you don't want to put anything that's going to go up in there. It becomes common sense. If you're free to do it, it becomes common sense on what you're going to plant out there. I got a lot of neighbors in here that I'm walking holly going, why don't you prune this limb off this one tree? I want to do it myself. I want to take a pair of pruners around, just cut a path through some of these places. So, don't plant spreading things, try to be nice to your neighbors. But almost certainly the vast majority of new neighborhoods have HOAs, and they're going to tell you what you can plant. They're likely going to tell you it's got to be grass. I mean, I've dealt with enough of those situations, trying to landscape in some of these neighborhoods with HOAs. It's one of the reasons that I slowed down landscaping over the years, is an annoyance with boards on HOAs, telling people what they can and can't plant in a neighborhood. Yes, I have strong feelings on that one. So let's see. Somebody asked me if dormant plants need sunlight. I think so if you were going to store, let's say you had a perennial in a container and it went dormant and you were going to store it in the dark, they don't need sunlight as much but they do need air movement, air circulation. The soil needs to dry out. So keep that in mind. If you put something in a container in a basement, there's some possibility that you could get some mold forming on that soil, and there, that could be an issue. So I want to put them somewhere where there's good air circulation around them still, because that could be problematic to end up with mold in the soil gets stagnant. In the wintertime, I would take the covers off my stuff at the nursery a couple times every winter and water them and flush that old water out, and put some new water in, just flush the old fertilizer out and things like that. So I do have some concern that when you say store something without light, you're also storing it without air or air movement. Okay, let's see. Somebody had some 5-gallon, they had some 5-gallon fruit trees, and they had them in plastic containers, and then they've transplanted them into fabric pots, and you guys have seen me use those. I've actually got a potato video I'm going to do in February from this past year. I shot the whole video of planting potatoes in the fabric pots and in the grow bags, and the whole process of growing potatoes. That video will be up in February because it's closer to the time to do it. They wanted to know the difference between having something in a plastic pot versus a fabric pot. The real difference is water. Those grow bags or fabric containers, they need a lot more water. You're losing water not only from the top and the bottom little drain holes, you're losing water out of the entire bag. And so that's going to be, that's what you're going to find, is they're going to require more water than they did in the plastic pots. But those grow bags do a great job of growing plants. Not just discouraging anyone from using them, but do know things dry out much, much faster in a grow bag. Okay, let's see. Somebody asked me if I'm getting bulbs this fall. I am. I ordered mine from Brent and Becky's. I would imagine I'll get them in the next week or two. They send them out when it's time to plant And so I didn't order as many as I have in the past, but I do have bulbs coming. And that leads me to the next question, because somebody asked me about growing. Okay, so in the southeast, we don't always get enough cold to cold treat tulips. Tulips need a certain amount of nights below 50 degrees in the winter time to cold treat them enough to come up and be vigorous every year. And so you'll see me when I get my tulip bulbs in, I'll put them in the refrigerator and I'll refrigerate them for a few weeks before I plant them. I talked about in last week's video about doing bulbs in containers and then putting some sort of protection across the top of them to prevent squirrels from getting in them. They wanted to know if they could just put the tulips in the pots, would that give them enough cold treatment because the pots are above the ground? Yes, I will plant some tulips directly in containers and just leave them outside. And even though my winter is not that cold here, the fact that they're in containers above the ground will give them enough chill hours to come up, in a normal winter. So yes, the answer is if you have tulips in the south, if you put them in containers, leave them above the ground, that should be enough cold treatment. Otherwise, they probably need a few weeks in the refrigerator, which I'll show. I've got a hummingbird right behind the camera. My hummingbirds, I think, are gone. And the hummingbirds I have coming through now, I think, are traveling. And so if you have a hummingbird feeder and you think yours are gone, continue to leave it up for a few weeks because, there he went right there. I don't think you'll see him, but continue to leave them up because the ones passing through can find some value in that. Let's see. Somebody asked me about, I got a lot of questions last week about planting in the fall. And fall, to me, is the best time to plant most shrubs and trees and hardy things. I tend to avoid grasses and tender things. I've talked about that a bunch over the years, but fall, I think, is the best time for planting. Somebody asked me if there's any special considerations for it. I don't think there's special considerations, but I think that the planting techniques that I've shown on this channel become more important in the fall than they are any other time of the year, and that's raising plants up when you plant them. Keep in mind you're digging a hole in the fall, you're putting that plant in, the plant's not growing, and it will push some roots in the winter time, but they won't be as aggressive as they would have been other times of the year when the soil's warmer. And so that plant's a lot more vulnerable to wet feet. And so having them mounded up a little bit, not putting dirt up on up on the stems and mulch up on the stems, just making sure that they're going to dry out between waterings. You do need to continue to think about water in the fall. Fall can be a dry time here in the south. We've gotten some rains from some tropical storms, but other than that, it's not raining in the next 10 days. It doesn't normally rain this time of year unless we get a tropical storm. So you do have to water, but make sure you're raising them up. That's the special consideration, which is not a special consideration. I plant like that all the time. It just is more important in the fall. Okay, somebody asked me, I have 3 more questions here for this week. Somebody asked me if there's a lot of poison ivy in North Carolina because they got poison ivy. Yes, there's a lot of poison ivy in North Carolina. There's a lot of poison ivy a lot of places, but man, it is, I couldn't walk 20 feet out in the woods here without finding it. I can find it in people's front yards all over this neighborhood. It's everywhere. You got to be careful here for sure. And wearing long socks if you spend any time in the woods is a good idea. Keep in mind if you get poison ivy on gloves or on socks or on pants, that oil stays on them if they're not washed for a prolonged period of time. If you pulled poison ivy with a pair of gloves and then put those pair of gloves away and pulled them out months later, that oil's still on them, and you can still have the same problem. So keep that in mind. Anything that touches the poison ivy needs to be washed, same as your hands or legs or anything else. I'm lucky. I rarely ever have had any issues whatsoever, but I grew up in it and kind of know, kind of know that a lot of times the problems are afterwards. After you've walked through with your pants on, a pair of jeans, and you didn't realize it's on the jeans, and you get it later that way. Okay, somebody bought some bags it was soil cube in small bags, that compost that I've used out here. I don't think, and they were super heavy. Doesn't really matter what the product is, but if you buy a bag of cow manure or compost or potting soil or peat moss, and it's like 5 times heavier than it should be, you can pretty much rest assured there's water in that bag. Somehow extra water got in that bag. It was sat outside and got rained on and maybe had a hole in it. It absorbed water somehow. Maybe it was bagged wet. You want to, and they wanted to know if it was a problem. It's not a problem initially, but you do need to go ahead and use it. I would not hold on to a bag like that for very long. You need to go ahead and open that bag and use it for whatever, because if it stays wet inside that plastic bag, you'll get some mold. Bags that stay that way for a long time become kind of funky. So I don't discourage you from, buying a bag that's 100 pounds. It should be 30 pounds, but do go ahead and use it pretty quickly, because like I say, it'll get funky in that bag. Okay. Last question for this week. Somebody asked me about planting around an old large Bradford pear, and they've got heavy roots under it. I would imagine a very large old Bradford pear, which old for a Bradford pear is like 20 years. that's like a really old man or old woman Bradford pear. I would imagine that sooner than later those trees are going to start to fall apart. They grow so quickly. They have weak wood. I would not plant a lot of expensive things or very valuable things under it regardless. For me, I'm probably going to be thinking about, if I have old large Bradford pears, about removing them, being preemptive in removing them, and consider just kind of starting over in that space. I hate to tell people things like that, but number one, Bradford pears are absolute terrible noxious weeds, really, really bad noxious weeds. I'm going to do a video soon on some of the plants that have become noxious weeds in this neighborhood, and Bradfords are definitely very high on that list, those calorie pears. But that would be my suggestion to you. I mean, I know nobody wants me to tell them to go spend $1,000 to remove some pears, but that's really probably what you need to do, rather than spend time or effort or money trying to create gardens around something that I think is going to be likely very temporary. And not last very much longer. Okay, so again, on the tiller, make a comment down below. It can be a question for next week's video, or it can be just any random comment, and then go over to Instagram and make a comment there below the photo today for a second chance to win. I'll do the drawing on the tiller next Sunday for the question and answer video, and I'll introduce some additional giveaways at that time. And again, I appreciate you guys, your participation in the channel, and your comments below these videos, and your liking the videos and watching the videos to the end, and all those kinds of things are the reason that YouTube has shown my videos to other people and gotten them to to subscribe to the channel. So I appreciate all you guys do for that. That's really on the folks who watch the information. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next Sunday for another question and answer video.